Hi, Namaste. I'm Julie Kelly, and today's talk is going to be on anger and why we get so emotional and why that emotion turns to anger. Now, we've all had it said to us at some time or other, stop being so emotional. Why do you get angry so quickly? Well, today I want to talk about where those emotions come from. But we all see things from a different perspective. So for some people, they think emotions come because we can't control our anger. For others, they think emotions come before thoughts. But from a Buddhist perspective, which most of my work is from, I work very much with the mind. From a Buddhist perspective, things are a bit more complex than that. So I want to kind of talk you through the Buddhist perspective on emotions and why we get angry so quickly sometimes. So in Buddhism, we have what we call 5 sense consciousnesses. Now you'll know them as the 5 senses. So there's touch, smell, taste, sight and hearing. Now in Buddhism, of course, we call it the 5 sense consciousnesses. And each one of those things has a sensation. It doesn't really make decisions about things, but like for example, if we hear something, we hear it and we gather some kind of information and then that carries back to the mind. But before we start and talk about these 5 sense consciousnesses, we should look really at what the difference between mind and brain actually is, because we don't think about it so much. But we know a lot about the brain because people have brain surgery. If somebody cut open your skull, they could quite easily find your brain. It's tangible and people could feel it and touch it. But you can't find the mind, and even if you were the best surgeon in the whole world, you could cut open someone's skull and never locate the mind. And yet it's the mind that causes most of the problems. So what happens with emotion and anger, and where does the brain and mind come in for it? Well, in Buddhism, we look at ourselves as being a clear consciousness, almost like a bubble, a clear bubble. And that bubble doesn't become tainted or affected until we start making dialogue with our thoughts. And from that, the emotions arise. But let's look at where those thoughts come from. So in Buddhism, we also believe in past lives and karma. And in those past lives, we've also had certain experiences and certain paths that we've followed. Now, we believe that we move from lifetime to lifetime, and we will continue to do that. So in Buddhism, we believe that the mind is like, if you like, it's like a guest that stays in the hotel, which is the brain, until such time it needs to move on into another hotel. And that's what happens in Buddhism. We believe the mind stays within the brain somewhere. It's the essence of the brain. And then when we die, it moves into another body. So that's how it moves on and on. Now then, what happens really with karma is that we have our own path, our own experiences. And when we die and enter the next life, the Buddhist viewpoint is that we bring with us something called subtle consciousness. So there's 2 different types of consciousness, or main types. There's several, but there's 2 main types. Gross consciousness, which is the things that we know, we experience, and the things we can touch, see and feel. So your gross consciousness would be, you know your name, you know you're female or male, you know you live in a house, you know what it looks like, you know what job you've got, you know who your work colleagues are. Now, subtle consciousness are the things that we know but we haven't experienced. So an example of subtle consciousness would be, we know Africa is a hot country, right? We may never have been to Africa, but we know from the pictures we've seen or information that we've gathered. So we know it from kind of second or third hand experience. And that's subtle consciousness, the knowledge that we have, the learning that we have. So when we pass into another life, into another body, we take the subtle consciousness with us. So it might be that in this life you're very good at languages. In the past life, you may have been a teacher. And that subtle consciousness, that knowledge that you had, you won't remember being a teacher, but you will have an affinity to learn languages. So that's how we view consciousness in a nutshell. Now then, when we go back to the 5 sense consciousnesses, the touch, smell, taste, hear, forgotten what the other one is, see. When we move on to the 5 sense consciousnesses, so for example, okay, we see something and we know what colour it is, we know what it looks like. And that information is taken back to the mind, okay? So the mind will decide based on experiences in this life or maybe in past lives, whether that sensation that the eye has taken back is good or bad, favourable or not. So it can happen from this life or past life. So example, in this life, if you saw a terrible car crash and you were traumatised by it, then if you see a car speeding in the road, you're automatically going to carry that information back to the mind. This is how it works, but it can happen from past lifetimes as well. So, say for example, the eye consciousness carries information back to the mind, and then the mind makes a decision that, oh, this is not good. Okay, from that, emotions arise. We start to become fearful, okay? And then that triggers something in the brain called the amygdala, which is a tiny pea size. It's like the size of a pea, which is in the brain. And this is called the pleasure center, but it also reacts to fear or emotion, and it reacts very impulsively, so it doesn't have time to rationalize. So then what that does, it triggers off a whole range of things in the body. So it starts the heart beating, the adrenaline flowing, because you believe something bad is going to happen. So the eye consciousness carried the information over, and from your previous experiences, these things happen. And that triggers emotion, fear, maybe anger, and it triggers it so quickly. And in anger is such a dangerous emotion. It's the worst emotion, because in anger we can kill someone, we can harm someone, and then within a split second that anger is gone and we're left with the consequences of what we've done. So that's how emotions arise. They arise because of experiences of the past, but those emotions also arise when we make dialogue with our thoughts. So for example, you could walk into a room and you see with your eye and you hear with your ear consciousness some people talking. When you enter the room, they stop talking. That information given to your mind would say, they're talking about me. So as soon as that happens, those thoughts start to blow around in your consciousness, your clear consciousness. They don't have a place, they just blow around. But the minute you start to make dialogue with them, for example, they're talking about me, so therefore everyone must be talking about me. What must people think of me? I'm going to feel so stupid when I go into work the next day, because I know people have been talking about me. What have I done? I wonder what I've done to upset them. Oh my God, I can't stay here. I've got to go home. Now, they may not have been talking about you, but that dialogue has been created, and from that has come fear, anxiety, anger, frustration, confusion. All of those emotions have arisen because we created a dialogue and made our own story about what happened. And that story may be true or it may be false, but nevertheless, those emotions have arisen. So how do we stop this? Well, the Buddhist viewpoint is we stop those thoughts before they actually turn into emotion and before the brain or the mind gives them dialogue. It's the brain that releases the chemicals or that triggers the chemicals in our body that get the adrenaline going, that get the tension going. But first of all, those thoughts are blowing around and creating dialogue with the mind. So through meditation, we learn to quieten the mind. And we can do this just by breath meditation, just by being with the breath. You remember the meditation I took you through before, which is just the breath meditation, the calm abiding, where you breathe and you just be with the breath. And by doing that, when thoughts start to come into your mind, you learn to embrace them and let them pass. You don't create a dialogue. Don't create any dialogue. It's natural to get thoughts because in our environment, lots of things are happening. We see lots of things without even being conscious of it, and we take in lots of information. So what happens when we try to be quiet is those thoughts, those things we've seen, they start to come back into us. But we don't need to make dialogue because there's no need. When we quieten the mind, we don't make dialogue with the thoughts. We accept the thoughts are there and we let them go. And the difference between doing that and actually having an active mind is that when things happen, when the mind's quiet, we can actually take a step back and breathe, and we can act on the things that happen. When we are impulsive and we don't quieten the mind, we react, and that reaction can be dangerous. So meditation is the key way to calm the mind so that we don't make dialogue with the thoughts and create our own story, and we can stop that anger from arising before it gets the chance. So it's about stopping the thoughts before they give rise to an emotion. So meditation is the best way forward from a Buddhist viewpoint. So all the meditation is, it's just breathing in through the nose and gently out through the nose. And just keep doing this slowly and peacefully. And just be aware, you don't need to do anything else or give awareness to anything else. You just see the thoughts for what they are. Simple thoughts about the environment around us, about things we may have seen or heard. That's all they are. They have no part in our life. They don't have part in our story. It's only when we make dialogue that we can actually start to create this situation that gives rise to emotions. But for now, I'm going to leave you. Please try the breathing meditation. Just do the exercise maybe 10 times, very slowly and very peacefully. Just being aware of the breath and how the body moves with the breath. And remember, if the thoughts come, let them pass and let them go. Don't give them dialogue. And when you do this, you'll learn how to handle thoughts like that in everyday life, not just in meditation. And what this does, it helps us to keep those negative emotions at bay. So, if you want to find any more about my work, you can actually go to my website at www.juliekelly.co.uk, and that's Mind Medicine. Or you can go to YouTube at Mind Medicine. Or you can catch me on Twitter at Julie's Chat World. But for now, I want to say good night. Thank you for joining me in this talk. Namaste.